Chapter 30. Mystery of Silence in Human Life in Existence. Introduction. Silence of mind is a very significant virtue that must be built into one's personality. If not, it must be cultivated as an essential prerequisite to step into being and to be beyond time and space. Silence is an integral state. It is the most peaceful state of a human being. The silent state is basically wordless, thoughtless, and breathless. On negation of breath and suspension of breath, the mind is negated. It is annihilated, and silence appears. Silence is the key to manifest consciousness. It is the pathless path to be with all living beings of existence. Silence is the universal mode of expression. Silence is the only path to merge in cosmic energy, in spirit, and to merge in the absolute. To be in absolute silence is the ultimate achievement in life. Nothing is higher than this. If one is in absolute silence, then he comes into the category of self-realized souls of the universe. To be in absolute silence is the backbone of religion and self-realization. Type of silences, relative and absolute. In the presence of breath, varieties of thoughts are sprouted, and silence is withdrawn from the mental plane. Silence is not merely to be wordless, or just keeping quiet is not silence. To observe mauna, keeping quiet, is a primitive silence. It is outwardly silence. Absolute silence prevails when one is within the self, and soul or consciousness is merged in the supernal, and one is in a super-conscious state. Other modes or types of silence are just the relative silence. One can easily communicate in relative silence when the receiver is also in silence. The higher level of relative silence can produce ideas, and it can receive the thoughts or signals. Dream, a silent state. In silence, one can dream. The dream state is also a type of silent state. Basically, the mouth is shut, but all the senses are in a working state, and senses are opened to receive thoughts from conscious and subconscious mind. A mute picture goes on in the mind. It is a state of relative and a temporary silent state. In short, in this dream state, one himself is the observer, but he is not awakened. If one is awakened, then he cannot dream. He will be in a dreamless state. Absolute silence is a dreamless state, higher state of silence. The suspension of consciousness and subconscious states only leads to the higher state of silence. It is the state of mergence. It is the state of conscious-less with its continuities. It is only possible when one enters from dreamy to sushupti, or deep sleep state to turiya, or transcendent state when the mind is annihilated and breath is suspended. Relative silence. In general, in the silence state, all the sense organs, that is, karma indriya, jnana indriya, and tanmantras, become functionless. Also, it is possible to achieve relative silence while using shunyaka technique, since under shunyaka there is no breath, as if the state of suspension of breath has occurred or achieved. Therefore, when all the indriya or senses are functionless, then the mind does not react because it does not get energy since breath is suspended. It has been established that the mind traps energy from breath, and so, under suspension of breath, the higher degree of relative silence prevails. In this state, there is no provocation, and no objective subjective or subjective objective reactions of the mind are present. There is no action reaction in the mind, and nor any subjective or objective motivation operates in the mind. Cause of disturbance of relative silence. It is the state of higher degree of relative silence. However, As soon as any outside memory enters, the silence of mind is disturbed. Also, it can be disturbed even by inside subconscious thoughts. Any mutative horizontal breath disturbs the equilibrium of silence. Breath has multiple complex vibration patterns of the external world. It disturbs the silence to a major extent by the multiplicity of thoughts. This may lead to propagate and create various desires that can ruin or disturb the inner developed silence, partially or completely. Absolute silence. Basically, absolute silence prevails only in the state of samadhi or emergence and in the turiya tita or transcendent states. In other states, one gets only the semi silence. By alertness, being in consciousness, one can prolong relative or semi silence by yoga practices. However, a simple breath can change the scenario of spiritual feeling, and irrelevant, mundane feeling can pour into the mind, resulting in disturbing the silence achieved. One must understand that silence is very mutative. No one can be in silence for a long duration by conscious and semi conscious efforts. However, these are the only means to be in relative silence. Role of ego in silence. Ego appears by Maya or illusion in the mind. This causes various desires to sprout in the background of the mind. Desires invite pleasures and memories, which give rise to grow other series of desires that subsequently attack the existing silence very violently. This leads to change of thoughts and affects the mind. Besides above, this provocateurs mind both subjectively and objectively by spoiling the silence completely. Real relative silence is achieved through manifestation of consciousness, and then it is enhanced by turiya or transcendent state. Certainly, this brings gradually with time absolute partial silence. Absolute silence is soul light. Absolute partial state of silence continues till the soul light or consciousness prevails and increases. However, if this state is transformed gradually into consciousness, less state under the umbrella of soul light, then it showers the bliss of absolute silence and happiness. Soul light, as above, if without any mutation, then it gives real silence. It is blissful and creative state. It is the stateless state. It is the state of the absolute, jiva, or living being and absolute silence. Jiva or living being is I-ness, and jiva, if accompanying the soul, is termed as jivatma, that is, personalized soul. It affects the sanity of soul, its true divine light, and hence the absolute silence cannot prevail in the presence of jiva or living being. Therefore, desireless attitude and rebellious attitude cannot be silenced and controlled in the presence of jiva. The silence can only be partially established if indriya or senses are properly trained to have qualities like that of a soul, which is non-mutative, so that the desires of jiva are temporarily dissolved. In other words, one must be jitindriya, the winner of the dynamic desires of the senses or indriya, so as to be in silence without getting provoked by any gimmick and desires of the senses. Role of breath in silence. One needs to propitiate the breath so as to negate it. By the mercy of breath, one can merge into the silence, such that breath does not disturb to be in silent state. One must learn the art to be pavanjaya, winner of breath, and he must be able to command the breath. Existence of breath in the body shall be in one's control so as to be in the zone of silence. The silence is the super commander, but it can be destroyed by any horizontal or worldly urge instantaneously very easily. Role of awareness or consciousness in absolute silence. Alertness or awareness or consciousness is to be strictly observed to prolong the silent state. There must not be any reaction because of any type of the horizontal worldly disturbances. One should be in rock like silence. It is only possible when aspirant is above the limitation of consciousness. He must be beyond consciousness. His consciousness must be dissolved in cosmic consciousness. His consciousness should not appear. The situation must be as sugar is dissolved fully in water. He must be in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Any type of consciousness in the horizontal plane, including subconsciousness, must not disturb the silence. All subjective and objective symptoms of any kind are to be nullified and must be shut down. These are feasible in the state of complete mergence in supernal. Techniques to achieve silence. Shunyaka and breath suspension are the most effective techniques to invite and enhance the silence. However, any horizontal breath can disturb the silence any moment. The silence zone is very delicate and very critical zone. Prolonging or elongation of the silence in human life are really very difficult tasks like Kukukshetra Sangarama or war. It is extremely difficult to increase the period of silence. It is just like to arrest the wind without solid boundaries. Silence is only possible and enhanced when manifested consciousness is well dissolved in cosmic consciousness. Role of subconscious state. Silence cannot be achieved by physical and mental efforts. If by active conscious efforts the silence is tried, then there are chances that one suffers in subconscious state and many disturbances are surfaced again and again on the conscious level from the subconscious state. Any subconscious feelings always try to disturb the silence with full vigor. So, the memory of the subconscious should be avoided by using shunyaka or void methods. However, it is very difficult to control the higher forces of microcosm and macrocosm and avoid them to react so as to maintain the achieved silence. One could only forcefully and consciously try such that subconscious thoughts must not make the unknown linkages to disturb the silence. Even reacting and answering the conflicting issues might disturb the achieved silence. Role of mind and thoughts. Basically, presence of mind disturbs the silence. Mind is required to be annihilated by suspension of breath by creating void in the system. This gives opportunity for consciousness to manifest. The best approach is just to observe the thoughts. One must witness the thoughts without action. Any good or bad thought must be observed. Thoughts must be witnessed but not entertained. Soon the thoughts will disappear and silent state will be continued. In short, thoughts must be taken as uninvited guests, inner and outer silence. Sometimes one has to keep artificial outer behavior to avoid the conflicts, but inside, poison of disturbances may churn more violently to create an era to destroy the inner silence. However, one must always try to get fake silence inwardly if the external conflicts are severe and beyond control, but it will be far away from the real inner silence. This is needed practically in life since no situation under any condition is in our control. To live in the society, one has to become outwardly civic by keeping or observing the fake inward and outward culture of silence. However, for a long time, such action and reaction of the outward conflicts cannot be avoided easily. These are very mutative. By ocean of inbuilt inner silence and philosophical inward inclination, this can be made possible. To keep silence, one must act subjectively, but objectively, one must not react, enact. The art. To be silent, one needs to learn this art of being in act. It basically requires separating the inner world from the outer world. This is the only judicious way to be inwardly silent. Tides and waves of disturbances of the outer world must be kept on the surface, and inwardly one must be silent and calm like an ocean. This above technique is the art of enactment to make the fortress of inward silence. Enactment is only feasible by having complete command on breath, by being consciously alert, and by controlling one's own emotions and reactions, etc. The best approach is to observe the breath silently to divert the mental tension. Issues with kith and kin. Enactment way of control to keep silence is not easily possible for one's own kith and kin. If one is disturbed inwardly in subconsciousness, then his outward silence positively gets affected. The only way is to shield subconsciousness by all possible means under such conditions, and conquer over rebellious thoughts of actions or reactions is to preserve silence by prayer to Almighty and implementing techniques as discussed above. However, even for a highly spiritual, advanced aspirant, it is not easily possible when one's own nearest are involved. To be with the breath silently is the only way. To be with the discontinuity of the breath is very effective. However, it is difficult to maintain and continue to prolong this state with time, suffering of a spiritual aspirant. By controlling the self or own outward reactions, the inward silence is positively disturbed for a spiritual aspirant. But for a common worldly man with his outward reactions, and the subconsciousness is not affected since he lacks sensitivity. He is not refined, but spiritual man, being highly sensitive, is highly disturbed. Spiritual aspirant at times affects his mental and physical health by keeping mute wordlessness and vociferous silence till he clears his subconsciousness by rebellion thoughts. This above is because the spiritual science does not teach reactions and allows only actions, and at the same time makes a person highly sensitive. So, in any active, horizontal, self evolved problem or issue, an aspirant suffers to the greatest extent. But for a common worldly man, this is just a normal suffering. This is because of suppressing of natural feeling of reactions to keep the outward silence by a spiritual aspirant. Its reaction to the inward personality is enormous and highly critical. Only breath control comes to rescue a sensitive person under these conditions. Relative silence is mutative. In short, relative silence is mutative. To be in silence, the reaction of the self must be much less of a spiritual aspirant due to his capacity of tolerance. However, inwardly, he gets disturbed because of his involvement in horizontal activities, even if he follows the path of enactment. Breath control is only solution for him. The absolute silence can only be achieved in samadhi or mergence. It is achieved to take step into being and to be beyond time and space. In all other states and controls, one gets mutative relative silence. This is only relative or semi-silence. This is only relative or semi-silence. For horizontal life to be in relative silence is an asset to live in peace. Silence is governed by Maya or illusion. Furthermore, silence is governed by Maya or illusion. Maya is arbitrary, mutative, and so the silence is never permanent. It changes with time, space, and causation. Maya or illusion is governed by awareness or consciousness, and so the relative silence is governed by awareness. It can be prolonged by awareness and manifestation of consciousness. Being aware and fully vigilant, one can save himself to fall down from the state of relative mental silence. However, absolute silence is the act of superconsciousness. It can only be achieved to step into being and to be beyond time and space. In silence, mind is annihilated. Breath is suspended. One becomes consciousless with discontinuities. However, he returns to conscious state with manifested consciousness, with divine energy. Maya or illusion is Brahma. This world is Maya or illusion, so its negation is also Maya or illusion. Suppression of consciousness of reaction is Maya as well. Maya or illusion can sprout out of mind from time to time. Maya is Shakti or energy. It can ascend vertically upwards. It is a Kriya Shakti, and this is not different from source light. It is governed by awareness or consciousness, and also it is a part of Brahma, the creator. Its dialectic possibility is Brahma. This mysterious mystery of existence, Maya or illusion, is also created by divine forces, that is, consciousness. Transcendental journey. Maya is very merciful. It is graceful. One must worship Maya, then only it may give way for the transcendental journey to merge with the supernal. By his grace only, one can cross the barrier of relative silence or awareness to be in the absolute silence or non awareness. It helps to come or arrive to the doorstep of samadhi or mergence. It is basically to ascend from para-apara level to para-para level of silence. That is, from the conscious silence that is with efforts to the silence without awareness or consciousness. That is, mergence or consciousness and without efforts. It is possible only to take step into being and to be beyond time and space. If it is achieved, then it is called Sahaj silence, which is nothing but the absolute silence. It is the stage of mergence of soul with the supernal. Then breath is completely suspended. There is no breathing process in this stateless state. Para-apara silence. The para-apara silence exists at the state of awareness. It is influenced by the memories of the subconscious state that creates the sufferings in the relative silence. Relative silence has to work against memories of subconscious state. It opposes the memories from subconsciousness. This makes the aspirant or sadhaka to suffer much more than experiencing the actual happenings to face the miseries of life. If one is fully awake and conscious, then memories from subconscious state get subsided. A memory of the subconscious state is very strong. It is difficult to handle. However, deep sleep is very helpful to forget such memories to ascend to the zone of silence. Sleep without dream is the best for the complete relaxation and to be in silence without memories. Silence is the rest of mind. However, conscious silence is illusion or Maya. Rest or peace of the mind is basically out of any action and reaction, even if the mind is awake. Such state of mind is wakeful rest. Observations of fresh breath to enter and used breath to escape is the wakeful rest of the mind. However, this is also Maya or illusion, relative silence and Mahamaya. Maya or illusion is wakeful and conscious activity with awareness. Also, rest or peace of the mind, even without action or reaction under these conditions, is Maya or illusion, that is, the relative silence. Any moment it can be disturbed. Even a single ferocious breath can completely destroy the silence. Maya, the relative silence, cannot take the spiritual aspirant to the stage of samadhi. Even in Turiya or transcendental state is partially illusion or Maya, and the divine light is Mahamaya. It is much beyond the senses to conceive. Divine light. Mahamaya is mother. It is divine light, and by her grace, the divine path becomes approachable. It is Para Shakti. It is Tripura Sundari. All of us beg for her blessings for success in the spiritual path. One can only put his efforts, but granting grace is a prerogative and mercy. Mahamaya is an active part of Almighty. And only through this silence, Almighty can be achieved by following the vertical path and finally to reach unmanifested stage to be in absolute silence in the stage of samadhi or mergence. That is, to be beyond time and space, to be in present and silent. One need not brood more on the past and tries best to forget the past to come over subconscious state. One must always try to live in the present and then overcome conscious state to finally land in the superconscious state of perfect silence. Tranquil breath is very helpful under these conditions. If one does not learn to be silent in his life, he is bound to suffer, particularly in old age when even kith and kin will not listen and follow him even his positive advice. Earlier one learns how to be silent, the better it is for positive and prospective living for him. Silence, the detachment. The other inner meaning of silence can be taken as detachment. If one does not feel concern, he remains silent. And in other words, it can be said that he is not attached. He is fully detached. By mantra chanting, the inner silence can be enhanced. Silence is the power of God. One must be silent to be with the Almighty. Generally, worldly people lose silence in views of the various problems being experienced by them from their kith and kin. However, it must be remembered or known that kith and kin have their own prarabdha. We are just the instruments for their birth to bring them in this world. Furthermore, silence is taught and understood by the subjective attitude. It is by psychological way of understanding the net situation. By objective means, silence cannot be cultivated. Our soul, being unmanifested, subjective dormant light, is the institution of silence within us. Soul, mind, consciousness, and silence. Our soul helps us in silencing the mind, which in turn is the source and guide to put full stop for the wandering of senses unduly for worldly issues, problems. Breath acts as a master to resolve the various complex issues related to mind and senses. Consciousness is a very powerful instrument to maintain silence by self-efforts. Para silence in the hands of Toria. Maya can grace silence both in vertical and horizontal journey of life. Sita, the life force, meets Rama in the Chida Akasha through the Setu, bridge of Sushumna, provided by Maya through conscious awareness of relative silence. Hanuman, the embodiment of silence, did show humility, even being capable of bringing Sanjivani within few hours. He did not act until Rama instructed him to bring Sanjiv Ani for Lakshmana when he was unconscious. Importance of silence in war. Silence is manifestation of capability and humility, and one must not misunderstand it even in worldly dealings. Even Ravana observed the power of silence during war with Rama and instructed his own Vaidya or doctor to attend Lakshmana when he was unconscious. Ravana understood that this war is the Dharma Yuddha, religious war. So by the power of his mental silence and without irritation followed the ethics of the war. This is all because of inner silence that guided him in the moments of crisis. Being internally in the state of absolute silence, he knew Rama, the avatar of Vishnu, the god, and wanted to be killed by him in the war. In short, silence always gives positive results when one is not egoistic but silent. Agitated, disturbed breath can spoil the cultivated, darker, developed silence. Yoga can evolve energy but cannot bring silence. Subtle ego developed out of Guyana, short knowledge, is much more dangerous than the gross ego and can disrupt the silence within no time. Even great rishis like Narada have failed because of the subtle ego, which lead him to confront with Narayana, the god. To surrender, the art of silence. In Maya or illusion, consciously one considers rope as snake, but when enlightenment approaches, ignorance disappears. Even unconsciously, one finds that rope is not a snake and vice versa. The best and the safest path to achieve silence is to be with the God, to be beyond time and space, surrender to Him, to come to Sharanagati to Him as a child, feel carefree, and be safest as a child with the mother. Mother takes full care in all respects and keeps the child comfortable. Surrender brings paramona, the absolute silence. Death is the mode of permanent silence. However, suspension of breath is the path of silence. To be conscious of silence is the relative silence. Sadashiva, the emergence of Shiva and Shakti, soul and supernal, and the Samadhi are the absolute silence. And it is easily possible if the life force penetrates each Hanadi gate at Dahahara Chakra. Then it passes through Apurna Bhavnadi that leads easily to supernal, mergence, samadhi, and state of absolute silence. Concluding remarks. Thus, from the above, it is seen that various factors govern the silence, and all are in the hands of Almighty, since abode of silence is the God Himself. It is to take step into being and to be beyond time and space. In short, silence is the highest state to absorb the divine energy to manifest consciousness for healthy and happy extended life. However, breath is God. It enlightens by projecting different means and direction to be healthy, happy, and to transcend time and space. In fact, the journey towards the abode of absolute silence must be the sole aim of aspirant life to be self realized in the realm of existence. To achieve silence in life, and particularly in absolute silence, is the highest achievement of life in existence. To reach at this level is unfolded deep mysterious mystery. However, one can achieve it by the grace of supreme power of existence.